All right, so tonight, now I want to go over the basics on the form workspace. Now, this is a fair bit different than how we've been working so far at this point. So far, we've been working very dimensionally and sketch on plane based and such. A lot of that stuff is still going to be able to be transferred over to augment the objects we create, but what we're going to be working with is essentially Fusion's version of the sculpting workspace. Now, no, it is not as detail oriented or rather as directly sculpted oriented as, like, say, a program like Blender or something like that. Those programs are very much meant for actual sculpting virtually. So, like making figures and things like this. This workspace is meant for still making more rounded or, yes, that you can make sharp folds and stuff like that, but it is still very much bound within how Fusion functions, that sort. So let me switch over to Fusion and I'll show you what I mean. So what we're going to start with, the actual assignment is going to be making utensils. Very simple stuffs. Starting with basically making a singular shape, and you can alter those and such with making a single spoon. Hooray, spoon. And then I'll also go along showing you some of the other features of things like how you can make a kitchen knife, things like that. The assignment essentially is going to be make 3 utensils. 2 can be modified from a single one, meaning make one and then alter the other one, but the third has to be completely different, meaning it can't be like spork and spoon and ladle, but it'd have to be like spork and spoon and spatula. They don't have to rhyme. But first, let's talk about the actual form workspace. The form workspace is this little pink bubblegum cube here. And as it shows, changing workspaces, just like when you enter like the sketch workspace or anything like that. But this bases around creating T-spline geometries. And I'll explain what that means in a moment. But one of the main things is, just like the sketch workspace, you do not have a history bar going along with this. So unlike how we've been working and being able to like jump back and forth in the history slider and such like that, this, like the sketch workspace, you kind of have to finish all in one setting if you want to be able to go back and forth. You could always, save, shut down, and open back up again later and continue to alter that form, but you will not have access to the stored history built into that. So be aware that however you work, it's kind of going to be more or less permanent. And all that just means is, okay, I'm going to have to actually I'm going to either have to figure out how to work backwards to fix something or start over. Not the end of the world, but just be aware of that. So, all right. So let's open up the form workspace, and you have, of course, a bunch of changes here. So you have your standards. You can still base things on a sketch, just exactly like we have been working. We have the ready-made forms of a box, a plane, cylinder, and you'll note that the cylinder is open-ended, and I'll show you how to like make cap ends on that. You have 2 spherical versions. You have a quad ball, which is a T-spline quad ball. Think of it kind of like how a soccer ball is technically a sphere, but it's more made of polygons. Bad example. Made of pentagons, so the 5-sided segments. That's how this kind of works. Essentially, what this actually is, it's a cube inflated to a sphere. That's really what it is. Yeah, faces. I don't like how these are organized. They should be organized better. That just bothers me. And then sphere, like, a globe. So you have longitude and latitudinal lines. Yeah, there's other ones. You have the torus, which is your donut shape. Quad ball, there you go. And you can also create pipes. Only difference is here, it'll still generate a rounded form, uniform rounded form, uniform rounded object around a sketch path, a line path, but you can then augment each of those based on faces and planes and such. Now, one of the tricks is, and I should have opened up some space here. Let me see if I can erase some stuff. Let me pause for a moment here. Okay, erased. All of these are based around what's called T-splines. And essentially, there's a couple of different ways a lot of CAD software works. Like Rhino works with what's a system called NURBS. It's based around the actual plotting of points and such, whereas Fusion works around what's called T-splines. And essentially, think of it in terms of exactly like we've been working with before, of fit point splines. So a curved line based on points, that should have been up there, and handlebars. Only these essentially mean it ends at a line with a T. It's very clever. But that also means this works as a net. And what I mean by that is think of it in terms of if you've seen like images and such of like spatial distortion and such in a grid. I know that. What the heck? We're talking about spatial distortions in this? No. Just more of that. Think of it in terms of you have a plane in a grid. Or if you want a different analogy, think of like a blanket or a net, whatever. You have a flexible plane. You can technically pick any single point and pull that. But as I pull that, inevitably, some of that is going to follow with. We have ways of augmenting the effect of that, but pulling that one point is going to change the curvature of the rest of the plane in 3 dimensions, of course. So what that really means there, and I should have switch this over so you can see the screen more effectively. So if you have this effective plane here, picking any point or so, pulling upwards will change the entirety of the plane to some degree. Only it's not just splines. You can work with, if this is more of a, well, any kind of object, you have the standard stuff we've been working with. You have points, your vertices, anywhere lines intersect. You have the edges, which are, of course, the lines between those vertices. And then you have faces, which are the space planes between both of those. And you can augment any of this stuff by selecting any number of those, meaning you can work just with points, vertices. You can work just with edges. You can work with faces. You can work with all of them, and you can isolate any one of them, or you can work with multiples. And obviously, the more things you select, the more everything will get altered. So not to bog down in like the actual mechanics and such, but that is essentially how this works. You pick any number of things, move it, stuff is going to follow with it. That's pretty much what that means. So T-spline just means it works off based around where things intersect. You move those things, other elements of your project move with it. You can affect the weight of all of that. So let's jump back over to Fusion and experiment and show you what some of the stuff does. So first thing, we'll just throw down like a box. Now, first thing you'll notice, when I select, I can start with like a center point box, and just like I would make a box or cube any other time, but it's rounded. That is just one of the display settings, but it's how this functions. You can, of course, play right out with how big it is, how wide it is, any of that. We can apply symmetries and such like that. We can also change how many faces it has, meaning if I add more, it subdivides the object into more and more and finer detail. I highly recommend a keep it simple situation here. Work with fewer faces and then subdivide and make changes and make more complex things afterwards. Once you've built out the general shape you want to work with, then add detail. Because if you try to add a whole bunch of detail right off the bat, like I said, it functions off of how many points and such you have. If you add a whole bunch more, now you have to keep track of all of those. So keep things simple, play with it from there. You can apply symmetry built in right now, but I'm going to leave that in a moment so you can see how this functions. But you can pick up symmetry of none and mirror, and then you'll have to select which way you want that. Is your symmetry going lengthwise, widthwise, or height? Depends on how many faces you have, and there you go. But let's turn that off for now, and I'll show you how to apply it afterwards. Okay, so it's 3 by 2 by 3 there. All right, great. which really is just around. Our main tools we're going to be using here are going to be obviously the create. You can build any of that stuff. And we still do have extrude, revolve, sweep, and loft. So those will continue to play into this. But our main tools are going to be edit form. This allows you to just grab anything and move it around. Because right now, it's just a form. I select one, I hit move, it's going to drag the whole thing. Control Z. But if I hit edit form, now I get this toolbox come up and I can select the faces. You can select lines, double click, and it'll select the edge all the way around. Or I can select my vertices. If you want to isolate these on your toolbox here, you have your selection, of course, whatever you're selecting. You have the transform mode, which is just right now I can do all the things. If I select translation, that just moves it to directional moves. But see what I just did? Have only moved it in one direction. I'm not moving the whole thing. I'm moving by whatever I selected. So let's Control Z that. Rotation is exactly what it sounds. You're rotating things, and then scale, you can scale up. Now, you have these individual options here. You have these little bars floating around your option tool here. I like to call it a gimbal because it's just kind of a lot of different things. You can select by how you want to move it. And also your selection filter here is what you are able to select. Select by vertices. If I select that one, all my little points show up and I cannot select the faces. I can only select vertices. Use my selection box and I can select multiples. By edge, I can select the edges, double click, and it'll select all the way around the edge. By face is just that, selecting faces, or select all the faces that touches. And then all means just that, all of them. So those are just different filters to help you select, or rather be more detailed or direct in what you're selecting. We'll talk about the object modifications and such in a moment. But what does this mean I can do? Well, let's switch to all and all the things. So if I select just there, just that central plane. Now, one of the things is you are limited how you can move things because ultimately you are trying to shape a three-dimensional object in virtual three-dimensional space with two-dimensional inputs, meaning my mouse can only move around on the XY plane, so I can only direct it so well. If you had like a virtual interface, like VR, hey, you can totally grab something and move it exactly where you want it. With this, you have to kind of move by planes and such. So along the X, the Y, or the Z plane, it's just kind of how we've done everything so far. But you have your directional lines, so you can just move in one direction. So you can already see what's going to start happening here. Directionally, or if I select the square in the middle, that allows me to pan. Now I can move all around in that XY plane, or actually that's the YZ plane. I can rotate. And you can scale. These outer lines here allow you to, the rounded one allows you to non-uniform scale in two directions. The flat line, either horizontal or vertical, allows a single directional scale. And then the center allows you to uniformly scale in all directions. Ultimately, when you finish, you would hit OK. It's going to calculate stuff. And then when you finish everything, you go to finish form like you would with the sketch. Now you're back in a solid form environment, and I've created a solid form that I could then still do things like, say, make a sketch plane right there, draw an object somewhere. Let's just say a circle, flippity bloop, sure. And then I can finish that sketch. And let's say extrude that object, both sides. Oh, let's do symmetric. And modify that sculpted form and modify it with the tools we've been using so far. So you can continue to use the tools we've used, but this is just simply adding one more layer. Only now we can add some very customized shapes. So let's go back into the form environment, or you can start a new one, doesn't matter. In this case, I'm going to go back to the form environment. Jumps back and you see how it changed the amount of edges and such. That's just simplifying it for the sake of creating a form. I'm going to hit F6 to resize. And I am going to change colors just so you can see things more clearly. Hitting Shift in, Shift November, and I go to auto color stuffs. All right, now let's play. I bring back up the edit form tool so I can go back and just reapply another edit form. I'm not changing anything. So now I can start playing. I can start moving things in and out, all that sort. But one thing I haven't done yet, and it will show you the ghost of what was, the ghost of Sketch Past, just to give yourself a reference. So this is a nice thing if you were needing to go back and alter something based around, oh, I actually made an alteration like with extrude, but I realized I needed my form to like back up a little bit so it would have just a different shape. You get that ghost reference so you could make your alterations accordingly. Let's change some stuff around, but let's also say, you know what? I want this to be like, symmetrical, so I can change one thing and it'll do the same to the other. I don't know if I'll still be able to apply symmetry on this, but your symmetry tool, you have multiple options. The default is mirror internal, which just means, just like anything, one side matches the other based around a central edge. Circular means if you have a circular object, round, then you can make radial symmetry. That's what that means. Oops. Duplicate means I'm going to make a duplicate copy, but mirrored across something. So that's more of like the common thing we've been working with mirroring an object or plane or anything like that. Circular duplicate, that's kind of like your circle pattern tool, only using mirror or the circle duplicate. Well, getting tongue tied. Links them all together, so an alteration of one will affect all of the copies. And then, of course, clear symmetry, and then isolate. You can, isolate single elements and make them asymmetrical. So let's try applying symmetry. Now, for this, we have an object with 3 faces. Let's see. I'm not going to be able to select the center, but if I select one side and then the other, well, we're going to run into problems because I don't have a shared line here. So this object might be problematic to play with symmetry. Might have to come back to that. I can hit OK, and let's see what happens here. It's going to show me what did change. All right, so it does have symmetry, just kind of in an odd method. Oops, did I just freeze the computer? Probably. There we go. So you can start playing that way. You make some changes. There you go. Now, this is all well and good, making changes, making alterations this way, but you can also pull and move those shapes by an extrude that's kind of on the fly. Meaning that if I select a face, let's go to the backside here. All right. And again, it's showing my symmetry side to side. Neato. If I press and hold Control, and then move, oh, sorry, it's not Control. It is Alt. There we go. Press and hold Alt. It extrudes on the fly. So now I can actually start stretching that form as I see fit. And I'm just rotating some things, just kind of seeing where it's going to go. All right, press and hold Alt again. The more times you do this, now you have to stop, pick up. You don't have to like pick your hands entirely off, but just let off of Alt, press again. It's going to keep extruding. So you can create multiple faces within that. And this is how you can start getting some like free form sculpts out of this. Of course, if I wanted to change the dimensions and such, I can still play with like the scale here. Oops. Now, if I use the scale there, it's going to stretch that shape there. And we're going to get some kind of like wishbone rocket ship thing going here, or a spaceship, whatever. Play with the orbits. Start rotating things. You can see how this starts to really manipulate. So there you go. Now, you will possibly run into issues if you go to finish form, recalculates, and it's got the hole still through it. But depending on if you have accidentally self-intersected the form, you're going to get errors because it can't calculate stuff like that because it's kind of trying to calculate a solid form. So what you can do with that, let's go back into that, is you can change how it is viewed. Like I said, when we made the box, it's a rounded box. Why isn't it angular? And then I can round it later. It's just a visual description. Go to utilities here, You got a bunch of different ones, and we'll talk about that stuff later. But just for now, the display mode. It is currently on smooth. I can switch to box display, and it makes it just very rigid. Now, the benefit of this is if I am making a complex shape, this simplifies everything, and I can kind of see it a little more clearly as to what it actually is, and I can make alterations that way. All of my other tools, the modify, edit form, all that stuff is still available in this mode. It is just a way of seeing the object. I have a combined version where I still get the benefit of seeing what the finished object actually looks like, but I get a ghost of how the form object looks in box mode. And all that is just a visual toggle. You can turn that off and on and play with it as you like. So I can still go into like edit form, select one of these, and let's say press and hold Alt to extrude, and I'm panning outward. So I still have the benefit of all that. Looks the part. Okay. Well, that's all well and good. What happens, and I'm going to turn this back to round. What happens if I delete a face? Go to any one of them, hit delete. It'll instantly round it out. Now, I don't know why it deleted that one. That's funky. Oh, that's just part of the mirror solution section. It's kind of a weird mirror. So you have options to close this up. You can go to modify and fill hole. It's pretty direct. All you do with that one is you select the outer edge, double click, and it selects all of those. It'll bring it as is. It'll bring it back to exactly how it was. You do have some options though if you want to just see how it closes up. Now this is kind of a simple face, so it's not going to really show a lot. Collapse just brings it back to a center point. You have your options here, weld vertices. We're going to talk about that later. Keep creases changes that from a rounded cap to now more of like a cylindrical hard line cap. You can apply creases and stuff like that by using the crease tool. We're not going to go through everything, but I just want to show everybody a few of the major ones. So if I select a couple edges here, it's going to make that edge now a sharp crease. Hit OK. So you can add sharpened edges into this. Now, last thing I want to show you right here is I closed that hole, made a crease, sure, great, whatever. This still has an opening. What happens when I go to finish form with this? Instead of staying a solid object, it changes it and displays it as what's called a surface. Now, we haven't experimented with this yet. This is actually an entire whole other tab with the workspace. We've been staying exclusively the solid workspace. A surface means that essentially it does not have an internal physical space. It is just the surface. So if you were to print this, you couldn't. It is you can't even say it's like a paper thickness thick. It is an object that has no internal volume. So how do I fix something like that? Well, if you zoom in, you can also see like, oh yeah, it's like golden inside. And it also, of course, has the holes that are right there. Looks like a space frog. Obviously, the most direct option is just go back into the form workspace and, close that up. Fill hole. Double click there. I can leave those creased. Say OK. Finish form. Now it displays as a body. So just know that you do have to have a closed body in order to print these and such. So major thing with these is experiment, play, just fiddle with the workspace. I did want to show you quickly, and I'll go ahead and save this. I realize I have not yet. Definitely save often because the form workspace can very quickly make some serious resource gobbling projects here. So definitely save often. Example, form workspace. Okay. So I did want to show you radial symmetry and such. So let me hide that one. We'll say space frog. Space frog it is. So same deal. Workspace, form. What happened? Oh, it saved the original. That's all right. Okay. So let's create something with like a sphere. All right. Same deal. Right in the center. Why not? Why not? 200 just for grins. Again, you could, of course, dial this back. I would recommend keeping things slightly oversimplified. So I'm switching from 8 face longitudinal and latitudinal faces to 6. You can apply symmetry here. You have mirror, which means you just select if it's lengthwise, widthwise, or height, which means just northern or southern hemisphere. Width technically creates a side to side, and whoops, can't have all the symmetry. And then length symmetry is just all around 360 on a longitudinal side or latitudinal side. So let's just clear that, and I'll show you how to apply it afterwards. If you're unsure, you're playing with it, whatever, go to symmetry, and you can, of course, apply that. Now you have the options: mirror, which is side to side, or in this case, circular. So I can select a face, and it gives me options. If I select the one just adjacent to it, it will create 6-sided symmetry. Over here, 3, and over here, 2. So, pretty self-explanatory. Select there, say OK. So now, if I go to edit form, select, say, like just that face, and let's press Alt and drag outwards. Very quickly start to create some pretty funky faces and such. I can make rotary changes. And obviously you get where this all can go. Real bonkers, real fast. But as you see, everything is following suit. Play around, experiment. You can take this very far, and you can get real lost in this. One last thing I did want to show you. What's that? Yeah, something, or like a tryptopus? I don't know. One last thing I did want to show you is what happens if you accidentally make a self-intersecting thing. So let's rotate this too much. Hit OK. And I'm going to go to finish form. It's going to give me an error. T-spline failed to convert because these faces are self-intersecting. It's no longer a solid object rotating. It's now rotated against itself and it's passed through itself. And that don't happen. It's clipped through itself. And of course, you get the warning edges. Oh no, what have I done? So hit return. It's going to bring you back. Now, your first option would be go to utilities and repair body. Now, at least what's going to happen here is it's going to point out where stuff is wrong. All the little stars, and there's a lot of them apparently. You can try hitting auto repair. Hit OK. That didn't actually solve anything. So this is where that visibility thing comes into play. Change it to box mode, and now I can much more easily see where the self-intersecting issue is happening. It's all right here. There we are. Meaning it's all twisted up on itself. Now, sometimes you can fix it. Sometimes you might just have to start deleting faces and make alterations as needed. Well, let's just leave it there. I know where I can fix this now because I can see it's all twisted. So I go to edit form, select just that top face, and let's untwist it. Rotate the other way until the faces look more like actual faces. Hit OK. And go to finish form. Now it's going to automatically smooth back out because that was just a display mode. We're all set. So that's how to fix it. Granted, I just showed you a really easy fix. We'll figure out how to find our way back out of other things. So in reality, there is so much to learn about the form workspace. We're only going to get to touch some of it, but play around with this. Find some tutorials online if you like. You're very welcome to look through those. I highly recommend it because, like everything we've worked with this semester, there's a lot to learn, but there's a lot to play with too. So experiment, play, go from there. And if you get too lost, yeah, that'll happen. We'll figure out how to find a way back later. All right.